Skeptics have a fair few catchphrases. This is one that I find particularly irritating because it's just ultimately meaningless, pointless, but they always throw it out as though it's some sort of knockdown argument thing. So let's start with extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. If we were to take out the two extraordinaries, we'd have claims require evidence. That's something I agree with. If you make a claim, you should be able to back it up. That's fine. The way I'd normally put it would be claims require sufficient evidence. And I think that's fair. For this particular phrase, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. It's just really odd. Let's look at extraordinary claims for a start with. What is an extraordinary claim? In this case, normally they're going to be talking about anything that's going to be to do with God or the supernatural or miracles or anything like that. It's extraordinary. It's just unheard of. I mean, how are they defining that? If they're just defining it as extraordinary as something that's supernatural, then they're betraying a bias there. That it's like they're already convinced of their conclusion and they're not going to be swayed. So that's just unreasonable. If they're saying extraordinary is something that doesn't happen very often, then the same applies to things like the Big Bang, which only happened once, or ice ages, which don't happen very often and haven't happened in any of our lifetimes. But these things are just part of the natural process of the way things are, and they just have the same kind of evidence as everything else. Extraordinary, it's this subjective word. You could say Usain Bolt is extraordinarily fast, because for most of us he is really fast compared to most of us, but he's just a normal human being, and the evidence for him being extraordinarily fast is watching him running. So this adjective extraordinary, it's just entirely subjective. If you were someone who was almost as fast as Usain Bolt, then maybe you wouldn't think it was that unusual. You'd think, hey, we're just two guys who do this. So saying extraordinary claims, it's just based on, from my point of view, this thing is unusual. This kind of subjective thinking is not really helpful when it comes to trying to find out what's true or not. It's just putting a bias there that doesn't need to be there. Okay, now how about extraordinary evidence? This I really haven't got a clue what it's supposed to mean. What is extraordinary evidence? I mean, even if we were talking about a miracle like Jesus being raised from the dead, the evidence, if you lived at the time, would have been one day you're with him, you're chatting to him, or he's preaching to you or whatever. The next day you see him hung up on the cross dead. He gets pierced in the side by the Roman spear. You see that the guy's definitely dead. You see them put him in a tomb, lock him up, he is dead. And then a few days later you're chatting with him again. What's extraordinary about that? I mean, the event itself is extraordinary, but the chatting, the seeing, the chatting again, all very, very normal, mundane activities, and they would be what would prove the extraordinary claim. So I really don't know what extraordinary evidence is supposed to be, because everything would come down to just what you've seen or heard or maybe tested. It all comes down to the same kind of evidence. So there is no such thing as extraordinary evidence. It's just a nonsense. So I really think this phrase, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, should be just put to bed, and everyone should use the more realistic phrase, claims require sufficient evidence.